It has been a hot minute since I posted a video. About 2 months, in fact. And I am feeling a little rusty, and I'm feeling a little weird about it. Some of you will know, some of you will have guessed, some of you will be wondering what I'm weighing on about. Oh, hi Roo. This is Rudy, my dog. Do you want to sit down, mate? Take a seat. Take a pew. Sit down. But the reason for that is that I lost a very good friend of mine in June. Some of you will know who that is. Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. I am not going to do the crying on camera thing, and there are two reasons for that. Firstly, I reserve the right to grieve in a way that I want to grieve, and that is not on camera. So I'm not going to sit here and cry and tell you how heartbroken I am, though I am not going to do that. Also, the friendship that I had with Alice was one of constant laughter, mockery, conversations where we would just generally take the piss and laugh all the time. And so the way that I am going to celebrate Alice's life, the way that I am going to remember her, is through those moments and not through the pain of the last 4 weeks or so. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do was come on and talk about 10 books that I think perfectly sum up my relationship with Alice. Alice was a badass. She was so brilliant. She has left a massive hole in my life, but the memories that I have of her are really special, and I wanted to share some of those with you. So Alice started BookTube about 6 months before I did, but when we met each other virtually and then in person, we just clicked. We clicked on a lot of things, but particularly on books. And we buddy read a lot of books together. We pretty much always had a book on the go together. And I just wanted to talk about 10 of those, 10 that sort of stand out to me. And the first ever book that we buddy read together was The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. If you are unfamiliar with this book, you are missing out. This is a book about a race car driver who gets a dog, and that dog narrates the story, Enzo, and he is awesome. He is an awesome dog. And we sort of see the ups and downs of this guy's life through Enzo's eyes, and it was an absolute joy to read. But there were some sad moments, and I can remember Alice was upset, like, before we'd even reached halfway, before like the things that you really need to cry about happened. Alice was already in tears. She loved Enzo so much, as I did, but she was definitely the more emotional of the two of us. But I do remember finishing that book. Oh, that was really sneezing. I do remember that I finished that book just before doing the school run with my kids, and I was such a snotty mess, and I left her a voice note on the way back, and I was like, oh mate, do not read this, like, if you've got to go out somewhere, like, don't finish this book just before you've got to go and like be presentable to the world. And really that was the start of us reading so many books together. I haven't even counted them, but a lot. I mean, 3 years worth of books where we'd read at least one a month, sometimes two, sometimes three. So from the first book to the last book that we read together, I felt pretty bad about this for a little while, but I don't think I have it up here. The last book that we read together was Ulysses. I encouraged this buddy read. We set this buddy read in 2022 for 2024. And the reason that I encouraged Alice to read this with me was because it's on my scratch list of 100 books that you must read. And so we set this goal in 2022, and I think Alice thought I was going to forget by the time we got to 2024. But one thing that we both had in common was that we loved a spreadsheet. We love spreadsheets. And so this was on my spreadsheet early doors, and it never moved. And so as we got into December, Alice was like, "You're really going to make me read this book, aren't you?" I was like, "Yep." And so she bought us a copy each. She sent me one, and she had one, and we were like, right, okay, so we'll read like one episode a month for about 6 months, right? I think we had 2 weeks off. Sorry, one episode a week for about 6 months. And oh my God, it was such a turd of a book. It was just awful. Like, the first 3 chapters weren't too bad. They were written in comprehensive language. After that, it was just like pretty much gobbledygook for the entire book. Literally, the amount of times we said like the highlight of this book was chapter 3 or episode 3, where the main character cooked a kidney and did a poo. That was the highlight of the whole book. Like 800 odd pages of absolute trash, with some somewhat pornographic sections in it. And I think actually reading this book sort of sums up Alice as a person and the kind of friend that she was. Alice was the kind of person who would read 800 pages of garbage with you just so that you can scratch it off a list and so that you can slag it off at the end of each week. And yeah, like I said, I felt pretty bad when everything happened, because I felt like I'd taken up so much of her time with this rubbish book when she could have been reading better things. But we did have such a laugh, and it was just, yeah, we had a lot of good memories. So going into the third book that gives me Alice vibes, and it's not really one book but a series, and that is the first Law series by Jo Abercrombie. So me, Alice, and also Jack from Spread Book Joy have been reading this series for a couple of years now. And we read 5 of the books together. So Jack had read some of them before, and Alice and I had only read the first book, The Blade Itself. And we decided that we were going to read these together, and we decided that we were going to listen to them on audio, because the narrator for this series of books, Stephen Pacey, is amazing. He does amazing voices. He just narrates it in such a way that it hooks you in. But one of the main things I remember that we always talked about in our little group was that Stephen Pacey pronounces grimace as grimace. And we used to count the number of times in a chapter or a section it'd say grimace or grimacing instead of grimace or grimacing. Yeah, and we just had a blast. We all love this series, and yeah, it's going to be pretty shit reading the rest of them without her, if I even do. But those books brought me a lot of joy. Reading those with Alice and Jack brought me a lot of joy. So going from joy of an enjoyable book back to joy of an awful book, I think probably the only book I ever DNF'd that I was reading with Alice, could that be true? I think that's true, was Flowers in the Attic by Virginia Andrews. We also read this with Jack, and Jack and Alice finished it and I did not, and we all picked this up for Garb August. And it's about, but broadly it's about incest, right? But it was so dull, like so dull. I don't know how Virginia Andrews managed to make it so dull. We'd be reading it, would leave our voice notes like, another day where nothing happened. And and those two finished it and I didn't, and I think that's gone down in history as like the worst book that we ever read together. So I had to mention that one. A book that we read more recently together was The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemison. This is the second in the Broken Earth trilogy. I read the first one years and years ago, like when I first started my channel, and then Alice got FOMO, so she bought it, or maybe I bought it for her, I can't really remember. And she read the first one last year, and she was like, right, I really want to read the next one. And I was like, I'll read it with you, because I've been meaning to read it for like 3 years. And so earlier this year we read The Obelisk Gate, and we could not put it down. It was so plotty. We were just like, whoa, all the time, like, let's do another chapter. And so that was brilliant. And N.K. Jemison is awesome. Love her books. I still haven't read the last one. Alice did read the last one. So I really want to read it and see how the series ends. One of the other things that me and Alice really had in common was a love of the Women's Prize. Some of you may know that we co-created and hosted the Women's Prize along with our lovely friend Charlie from Charlie Book Reads. And this year was our second year of doing that. But last year, one of the books that took us really by surprise, and we don't always buddy read all of the Women's Prize books, but we did buddy read this one, was Careless by Kirsty. And that's about a young girl who finds herself pregnant as a teenager. She's in the foster care system, and you just grow to love this character and her best friend. I think her name's Beth. I can't remember what the best friend's name is. And I remember us reading this and we were like, this is so good. Like, a book that neither of us really would have picked up had it not been listed, and it blew our socks off. And then we were very angry for a very long time that it didn't get shortlisted, because we thought it was excellent book. On the converse of that, but staying with the Women's Prize, was Pod by Laline Paull. If you know, you know, but Pod was an acquired taste of a book about dolphins and other sea creatures, and sort of to do with ecological damage of the oceans. But really there was just quite a lot of like sea creature porn and rape and sexual abuse and orgies. Like, and we read that together, and I'll have to go back and see if I can find some of the messages, because they were hilarious. Like, oh my god, what just happened? Like, a clam just had an orgasm in the middle of the sea. What is happening? That was definitely one of our more memorable reads together. One of the other things about Alice that we used to talk about all the time was, she used to say to me, Gemma, I don't like big books. Like, I don't, like 300-400 pages max. That's like my limit. I don't like to read big books. We've already talked about Ulysses, which is like 800 pages, and we've talked about the First Law trilogy, which are all about 500 or 600 pages long. But another one, which I just use these as examples again and again to prove to Alice that she did like big books, was Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. So that was Booker listed. Was it Women's Prize listed? I don't think it was. It was definitely Booker listed. Maybe it was Women's Prize listed. And this one's about a young woman who has a passion for flying, and she wants to do the Great Circle, run the Earth, pole to pole, around the world. And it's epic, great characters. There's like a split timeline with sort of one of the... what is the pilot's name? I can't remember now. And we have one of her ancestors in sort of the current time, and then we have her timeline. And we devoured that book as well. We absolutely loved it. Big fat 5 stars. And it just went to prove that I was right, and Alice did love big books, even if she passionately disagreed. Speaking of big books, we also read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which is very long. It's like 1,200 pages long. We read the proper version, not the abridged version. And we read this with Fraser, from Fraser Simons, and and we started this book. I think we started it in August or something, and we were like, okay, we'll read it over, I think it was 8 weeks ish. And Fraser finished ahead of schedule because Fraser is a reading machine, and me and Alice were still going. And it took Alice like another 4 weeks, so I think it took me like another 4 weeks after that. We did really love it, but it was one of those buddy reads that just went on and on and on and on because it was so long. Similarly, we actually read Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky with Sandy last year, from Miss Reads a Lot, and that was a similar situation. Sandy finished on schedule, and then Alice finished, and then I finished about 6 months later. So it was, yeah, not all of our reading experiences were quick and snappy like the NK Jemison or Careless. Some of them went over a long period of time. And the last book I'm going to talk about, again, is a series, actually, and that is the Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper. So I have seen many people putting out videos about Alice, and how much they appreciated her presence and loved her, and talking about the books that she loved, and everybody is mentioning Agatha Christie, and, you know, yes, Alice loved Agatha Christie, that's absolutely true, and Arthur Conan Doyle and Lee Child. She did love all of those authors, but I think, and Jane may correct me if I'm wrong, Alice's mum, I think probably one of her first loves was Susan Cooper and the Dark is Rising sequence. It's a series of 5 fantasy books, middle grade fantasy books, about the light and the dark, broadly sort of linked to Arthurian legend, set in Cornwall and Wales, and we follow this group of children who sort of have to rise up with the light to fight against the dark, broadly. And we read with Jack the first 3 last year. We were supposed to read all 5, but then me and Jack have no staying power, so we read 3, and then Alice went to an event with Susan Cooper in October or November, so she read the last 2. I did read The Grey Wolf last year, which was number 4, and then this month I have just finished the last one, Silver on the Tree. That was my book to read and think about Alice, rather than a Christie. And yeah, you can see why Alice loved it so much. It's so magical. It's just got this heart and this sense of adventure. I mean, for me, that book was The Hobbit, as a child, that my dad read to me, and then I went on to like have a love of fantasy after that. But Alice, this was the book. This was the book her mum read to her and her brother when she was little. This is the book she reread several times. And so I'm really glad that I've now finished this series, and I just wish that I was able to talk to her about the ending, because obviously I can't. And I guess reading is going to just be a little bittersweet for a while, when I read things and I want to talk to her about them and I can't. But I'm not going to get maudling. I'm not going to do that. So those are 10 books that make me think of Alice and make me smile when I think about them and think about the fun that we had when we read them. I would love to know in the comments if you have read any of these, and also if you have any books in particular that make you think of Alice, or that you read with her, or that you read because of her. I would love to know. And yeah, that's it for today.